So welcome everybody to tonight's talk. We've got Thay here this evening. I will pass over to you, Thay. Thank you so much for being here and welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. So we might start with 10 minutes of sitting meditation. Just find a way to sit comfortably where you are. Whether you're sitting on the chair or sitting on a cushion, it doesn't really matter. But as long as you've got your back comfortably straight and your feet are flat on the floor or your legs are crossed. I don't think anyone seems to be sitting on the floor, actually. It doesn't look like you are. So we'll sit with our feet on the floor. Our hands, your hands can be folded in your lap. One hand, usually the left hand on top of the right hand. And, oh, my glasses are crooked. Or you can have one hand on each thigh. So you sit quietly like that with your back nice and straight, but relaxed. Relax your shoulders. You can close your eyes very gently, or you can leave them open and maintain a gaze about 1 meter in front of you. All of this depends on your own preference. Imagine that you have a fishing line attached to the crown of your head at one end, and at the other end it's attached to the ceiling, and your head is bobbing on the end of this fishing line. You just gently take the fishing line between your forefinger and your thumb and imagine that you're pulling it up, pulling the thread up. So your back straightens a little. Tuck your chin in so that your nose is in line with your abdomen. Relax the shoulders. Allow a gentle smile to appear on your lips like the smile on a Buddha image. And when you feel perfectly stable in your seated position and perfectly at ease, then take 3 gentle, deep breaths. And on the out breath, release all the thoughts of what's gone on before this moment today. Release all the responsibilities that you've had today. Allow them to be let go of. Let go of them. And on the out breath, as best you can, let go of the myriad thoughts that you've been carrying around with you all day. No matter that they might be pleasant thoughts or unpleasant thoughts or something in between. Just breathe in, breathe out, letting go. And simply rest in the quiet of the evening. Allow the quiet of the evening to uphold you. Nothing to do, nowhere to go, no responsibility. Just enjoying the quietness of your in-breath and your out-breath. Just enjoying the quietness that is natural to your calm and loving mind and heart. Breathing in, breathing out, being aware of your breath, wherever you most readily experience your breath. Is that at the nostrils? Is it in the chest, or is it in the abdomen? Wherever you most readily experience a calm breath, keep your attention there, resting deeply, breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out, keeping your attention gently in that place in your body where you experience the in-breath and the out-breath. Letting go of all the thoughts and feelings that arise and simply coming back to the breath, breathing in, breathing out. Gently bring your attention back into the room. Notice yourself sitting in your seated position, your body touching the floor or the chair. Be aware of any sounds in the room that you might be able to hear. Be aware of the temperature. Any smells, any sensory experience at all. Come present to the room in which you're sitting, and eventually just open your eyes, and you can stretch, massage the body, massage your eyes, and come back into the company, the rest of this Sangha. So what's the weather like in Sydney tonight? Is it wet and cold, or is it not wet and cold?
I I don't know. I haven't been outside for a while, so I don't know.
You can't hear any rain on the roof?
No, I can't. Yeah. No. I'll go and have a quick peek and come back and tell you.
It's not raining where I am, but it's chilly.
It's chilly.
It feels mild, and I'm in Sydney too, but I had a nice walk with a friend visiting from Melbourne, so that probably warmed me up.
Mm. It's been pouring here, which is lovely. Just lovely.
Where are you now?
I'm in the Flinders Ranges in South Australia.
Oh, right. Okay.
So South Australia is the driest state in the driest continent on Earth. So
Is
when it
it?
rains here, it's, yes, yeah.
Oh, really?
So when it rains here, it's considered to be a real blessing. And people have car accidents on the days that it rains, and they say, "Oh, that's because of the roads get oily." But I think it's because people are so unused to the rain, they're looking around wondering, "Oh, what's that wet stuff falling out of the sky?" And then they run into each other. But that's just my story. I don't know what the real truth is.
Yeah, my brother lives in South Australia, but he's near the city.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But it's not raining outside here.
It's not, okay.
No.
But you get a lot of rain, of course, all the flooding and that, so it's
Yes.
probably a good thing that it's not raining.
Yes, it is, yes.
Mm. Okay. Over the last 2 years of offering Dhamma reflections to the Association of Engaged Buddhists, both in person at Sangha Lodge and more recently on Zoom, I've endeavoured to share not just my understanding of the Buddha Dharma as I've received it, but also how I have understood it within the context of my own life. So it's one thing to absorb a Dharma talk or the teachings. It's another thing to figure out how to apply it in the context of the life that you actually live. I don't offer lectures on the theory of Buddha Dharma, partly because I don't find that approach natural to my personality. I'm not a lectury type person. And partly because I'm a school teacher originally, and my training and experience as an educator is not interested in what I call the banking method. And the banking method is what the Brazilian educator Paulo Freire, who is formative in my thinking as an educator, called a dominant mode of teaching and learning. Banking, the banking method where information was put into your head and your job was to regurgitate it exactly. That's not really the best way to learn. In fact, it's probably the worst way to learn. So that's to say, I don't want to deposit information and ideas into other people's hearts and minds and expect people to regurgitate some official version of Buddhist reality. My interest is in people taking on board the teachings as they understand them and practice them in their lives and come up with their own authentic expression of their practice and their meaning. And I think that's what the Buddha was pointing towards in the Kalama Sutta, which is a sutta well known amongst both Mahayanists and Theravadins. Some 18 years ago, just after my ordination as a novice monk, another Westerner asked me why I had become a monk. And I've come to realize that that's actually the wrong question. But the monk in charge of the temple with which I was associated at the time answered for me. And he said he was concerned with change and how to deal with it. Thanks, Thay, but you're wrong. I was born a monk. It took me a while to get back to who I am deepest down, and it took me a number of tries, but here I am. It wasn't because I'd managed to realize some some philosophical point of view and thought, oh, this is the one I'll choose. I'll become a monk in this tradition. No, it's because I was born one. I was born a monk. And although that's the truth, I didn't say it out loud at the time. I'd learned enough about human nature to know that my dear mum was right. What they don't know can't hurt them. So I kept it to myself and thought, you can believe what you like. But that's not my experience. Every faith tradition, every philosophical and sociological and psychological school will have its own explanation of why individuals feel compelled to take a certain path in their life. For example, in the first chapter of the book of Jeremiah, from the Hebrew scriptures, God tells Jeremiah that he was consecrated to his role as a prophet to the nations while he was in his mother's womb. He came into the world already a prophet. I think the whole story of why we are who we are and where we are is actually a mystery. That is to say that to a great extent, the origin of our vocation in life is hidden from us. But it is worth examining. So you will meet some Buddhists who are so certain of the teachings that they've received that they will only brook their own understanding of karma. Oh, you're this because of your karma. That presumes that they're so advanced on the path that they can look into my heart and mind and see with supreme clarity the karmic patterns that make me up. Lucky them. But I am not sufficiently convinced of their point of view. Every phenomenon is the result of innumerable causes and conditions, accessible only to the mind of a Buddha, to the omniscient mind. For me, there is also a sense of grace at work in my life, and I use that word deliberately. It's the free gift of a benevolent universe that works in conjunction with all of the other causes and conditions that arise in my life. That's not only my point of view, it's also an expression of how I have understood my experience in life. Over the next few Dharma talks, I want to share with you my experience of the Christian teachings that led me to the yearning to become a monk, to engage in the path of renunciation, which belongs not only to monastics, but to all practitioners of a spiritual path. And renunciation is a fancy word that just means letting go. And in the Pali language, we use the word nekkhamma, letting go. And I think I mentioned last time that my first Dharma teacher, the famous and great Ayakema, had a little saying. She would say, letting go is the essence of the spiritual life. Renunciation is the essence of the spiritual life. And that is what I felt myself called to as a young person. And it's not just the calling of monks and nuns, as I said, it's the calling of all practitioners of a spiritual path, the calling to let go. It is the path of letting go, really, of false notions of self and living out of what I call the path of the true self, the path of realizing my inherent Buddha nature. And there are many names for this path. Some will refer to this realization as, for example, De imitatio Christi, living out the imitation of Christ, for example. Either way, in my view, these paths, along with other expressions of living out the same journey, lead to an illumination of the heart and the mind that result in the fullness of what we call metta, karuna, mudita, and upekkha. So in this process of renunciation, in this process of opening the heart, in this process of not holding on to a sense of I, me, and mine, there is an illumination of the heart and mind and results in loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, or just pure spiritual joy, and open-heartedness or equanimity. I'm not sure if this is the time to introduce a book, to sell a book to you, but I'm going to anyway. My concern here really, in this thinking about renunciation, is about letting go of the I, me, mind thought, the idea that there is this solid, permanent self that needs to be aggrandized and needs to be protected. And I'm going to suggest at some stage in your life you read this rather wonderful book by Ajahn Buddhadasa Bhikkhu, who was a venerable Thai master in the Theravadan tradition, called Heartwood of the Bodhi Tree. And it's his book about emptiness, about voidness. And you can buy it, but you could also download it as a PDF on the internet. And I really, really recommend it. I think I've read the book about 4 or 5 times. And my little Sangha here in Adelaide, we studied it together last year. But it's a whole book about the real significance of how attachment to the I, me, mind thought is what causes all the problems in the world and all the problems in our lives. And the importance of recognizing that this I, me, mind thought is empty of substance and reality. And the important thing is to let go, to renounce that notion. So if you get a chance to read it at some stage, I don't know if you are readers of any sort, but it's available, as I said, as a PDF on the internet. And the teacher is called Buddhadasa Bhikkhu, very famous Thai master. And if you want me at the end, I can put it in the chat so that you can check it out on the internet. And it's this renunciation, this letting go of the idea of self that's at the foundation, for me, of my own spiritual life. And so I want to give you a little introduction to my journey, my spiritual journey, and how I got to this point of understanding that renunciation is the foundation of my life. It doesn't mean I'm particularly good at it or successful at it, but it's the direction I go in, the direction I hope I'm going in. So here's a little introduction to my spiritual life, which I hope will give you some idea of why renunciation is significant to me. I was born into a working class Methodist family in Port Adelaide in 1952. I went to Sunday school from the age of 3 and I loved it. I associate with Sunday school a number of things. I associate with Sunday school the sense of being really loved by my teachers at Sunday school. I associate with it the sense of belonging within my extended family, who had been Methodists from the beginning of the Methodist movement in England in the 18th century. I acquired a love of singing. After all, as the Methodist hymn book says, Methodism was born in song. So I've always enjoyed singing. And it's one of the things I really love in Thich Nhat Hanh's tradition, because you get to sing in that tradition. And I really miss it sometimes, although chanting is also beautiful. From what I was taught, I understood that all of the characters of both the Hebrew and Christian scriptures were my people. There is a common Christian idea that says that Christianity has made Judaism irrelevant, but that was never part of my worldview. At Sunday school, I learned the stories of all the characters of both the Hebrew and Christian scriptures, and they were all part of my people. And in the end, there was the great love I had for Jesus. And I say even now that I'm a Buddhist monk who loves Jesus. So what's not to love? In my primary years at school, I began to feel an attraction for Catholic faith and practice, something this little Protestant boy learned to keep quiet about in sectarian little old Adelaide. After prayer in our religious instruction classes at primary school, I used to make the sign of the cross like this. And I was told by some kid, "We don't do that." But I like doing it, I said, and I responded quite fearlessly to that. And even now, if I see something shocking and hurtful, or I'm touched deeply and lovingly by the words or actions of another person, I'll bless myself. I've always been grateful that we Buddhists make Anjali or Gasho because it gives me something to do with my hands. And that's what I had when I used to make the sign of the cross. From age 5, I wanted to be a minister, a man with a Bible. And this vocation returned with some force after a spiritual awakening at the age of 15. But that sense of calling transmogrified in my 16th year, and it is this that I want to share with you. On the front cover of my Bible, given to me by my parents for Christmas in 1962, when I was 10 years old, is inscribed a note, and the note is the monastic rule. And I put this note in there myself. It came from my own heart, and it's followed by 5 quotations from Matthew's Gospel. I read the first one, Matthew 13:44, in bed one night in 1968 at the age of 16, and it says this: "The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and covered up. Then in their joy, they went and sold all they had and bought the field." It was the first in a series of texts that inspired me on the path of renunciation. It was at this time that the yearning to become a monk was first awakened in my heart. At that time, I was filled with an idealistic zeal to do God's will alone, to live the life of integrity exemplified in the life of St. Francis of Assisi, which I had become acquainted with from a book loaned to me by one of my cousins. I suppose I thought when I looked at St. Francis's life, I'll have what he's having. I think I remembered this particular text from Matthew by heart, pretty much from the first reading. It became what we Zen Buddhists call a Koan, a text, a poem, a saying that lodges itself in our hearts and remains there as a source of reflection, probably for the rest of our lives. Did the man go looking for a treasure, or did he just happen upon it? Did I go looking for a treasure, or did I just happen upon it? I think it was both. And I think there was a third factor. I was led, I was guided, I was called to it in my heart. And at that time, I understood that calling was from God. I think the person I was, the deep down contemplative with the pastoral heart, always had his eye out for the way in which his life might be lived, in which he might most fully express who he truly was. At 16, as you'll all remember, the pressure is on to decide what to do with our lives. The most I'd wanted to do up to that point was to become a free-range chicken farmer living in the country, or to become a linguist, as I've always loved learning languages, studying philology, and thinking about my ancestors as they sat around the campfire at night inventing English. But from the time of my spiritual awakening in 1967 and onwards, all I wanted was to serve God. At first, that calling took the form of becoming a minister in the Methodist Church, the Christian denomination in which I grew up, as I said. It was a return to the sense of who I might be from the age of 5. But this text called me to sell everything, to renounce every ambition, every possession, every normal pull of society, and to go to where God directed. This, in conjunction with the knowledge that I would never marry, allowed me to consider seriously the path of renunciation. Further, the more Catholic and contemplative spirituality that I had encountered became more attractive to me, rather than the evangelical Christianity that I'd grown up in. But I also happened on this verse. I didn't go looking for Matthew 13:44. I happened on it, and it jumped out of the page at me, demanding my all. It jumped. It acted in conjunction with my deepest and until this point unknown or unconscious yearnings. It called me into itself and into my true self. I recognized my true self in this text. I had encountered the treasure and now had to renounce everything to gain access to the treasure. It wasn't hard to sell everything I had to buy the field. At least it was not hard at that time in my life when I didn't own anything at all, really. More latterly, I've understood that my renunciation doesn't buy the treasure. I buy the field, that which gives access to the treasure. I can never own the treasure. The treasure owns me. And it's a little like the ring of power, which takes possession of the hobbits who encounter it. Only this vocation was for the sake of the kingdom rather than the control of the rest of the world. Middle Earth in the case of the hobbits. The context which leads to life is the context I was interested in. It became what Paul Bunyan calls in his hymn, my first avowed intent to be a pilgrim, a journeyer. And so Bilbo Baggins's song becomes very real for me. And his song says this: the road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can, pursuing it with eager feet until it joins some larger way where many paths and errands meet. And whither then, I cannot say. And what I really love about that verse from Tolkien is that this path, this calling, this vocation does not make it clear where you'll end up. You also have to renounce any kind of hope that you will be in charge, you will be in control. Now, this path of mine, right from when I'm 16 to now, hasn't been easy. There have been many obstacles, many twists and turns, many opportunities to learn, to gain insight. Perhaps the biggest struggle I had occurred when I was 18 and I had been accepted into the Society of the Sacred Mission, which was an Anglican religious community here in Adelaide. I was required to matriculate. My mother was, for her own willing reasons, unwilling to let me go. And when I didn't matriculate but was accepted as a provisional student at a teacher's college, she insisted that I take that path rather than go back to school and repeat my matric year. The brothers in the community offered her $10 a week to let me go back to school, and $10 a week was quite a bit of money in those days. But she rejected their offer. In the end, the brothers said they were not willing to break up a family, and so I went to teacher's college. I was greatly disappointed and very angry at my mother, the church, and God. It took me many years to understand my mother's motivation. In fact, I got a great deal out of that time in teacher's college, and I've only been able to acknowledge that in more recent years. I grew up, and although I was rebellious at times, it was in the context of my study, the people I met, the underground theatre group I joined, and the anti-war movement I became part of that led me to losing my Christian faith and leaving the church. I also did a course in Southeast Asian history. I wrote an essay on Buddhism, which sparked my interest, and I came across a Chinese proverb which said, "If I keep a green bough in my heart, the singing bird will come." This was another koan, which I did not understand at the time, but I knew it was meant for me. In part, it meant that while I lost my religious faith, I never lost my vocation to the religious life, my yearning to enter on the path of renunciation. Holding fast to that vocation was the green bough, and eventually the singing bird did come. The truth I discovered is that you can't tell a gift when to come. If you try to tell a gift when to come, what you're doing is tearing it out of life, and it's no longer a gift. It's something that you are demanding of life, and that's not renunciation. All of this experience and much more besides has prepared me for the moment, the actual moment of complete surrender. And has that moment come? I suspect not. But somewhere out there beyond all of my imaginings is that final big moment of renunciation when all is surrendered, particularly the grasping to the thought of I, me, and mine. The 9th century Japanese poet Narihira says, I have always known that at last I would take this road, but yesterday I did not know that it would be today. And I suppose it is today. In each moment, that surrender of I, me, mine takes place, sometimes easily and often not. And as you know, recently, my deeply loved brother passed away. He died. And there's an enormous amount of surrender and letting go that takes a long time when someone you love dies. So letting go, this surrender, this renunciation occurs regularly in our lives. It occurs every day. And surrender for me is the hardest thing about meditation. I don't go around saying I'm a great meditator because I'm not. I just do my best. But surrendering the thinking mind is the one possession I refuse to renounce. I'm not yet a monk. I'm not yet a renunciate. I have not yet given myself fully to the treasure. But that is my vocation. And when I was a Benedictine monk many years ago, and one of the brothers in our community used to say that you're not really a monk until they put the last nail in your coffin. And although that monk was not someone that I got on with very well, I did see the wisdom in his reasoning that renunciation is a lifelong process, and perhaps even several lifelong process. And as I said, the hardest place for me for letting go is in the practice of meditation. So what is the treasure that this scripture from Matthew's Gospel talked about? The simile that Jesus offers, that the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, and a man or a person in their joy sees it and goes home and sells all they have. The simile that Jesus offers about the treasure doesn't tell us exactly what the treasure is. Just as the Buddha doesn't or even cannot say what nirvana is. For us, nirvana is the great treasure, but the Buddha never says very much about it. And the Buddha, I think, cannot say very much about it. Nirvana is, in fact, a negative term. It is the putting out of a flame, the flame of attachment to I, me, and mine. As I understand it, I need to extinguish the flame of I, me, and mine, that deceit that appears like a treasure but is only a counterfeit. The real treasure of generosity, love, and understanding is buried in the field of our lives, which we gain access to by letting go, renouncing the attachment to self, the source of all greed, hatred, and ignorance. And that's where I've come to in my life in regard to this reading from Matthew that's hung around since 1968. So how long ago is that? 1,000 years, it feels like. That's where I've come to with regard to that text, which inspired me so much when I was a 16-year-old. So what I'd really like to know is, where do you find renunciation or letting go in your life? Where does your life call on you to let go of an attachment to self? And I'm inviting you to share that with us now. You've had my story, but mine is only one story.
Hi, I'd like to share. Natalie, thank you.
Please.
The one that comes to mind for me is that I've been back over 3 years from a couple of years in Hollywood pursuing my acting career. And I struggled for a little while in wanting to go back, because there was a part of me thinking, that's the mistake, you know, I should be in Oklahoma with my, my grandchildren. I shouldn't be here with elderly people. I should be having all those auditions and getting that work and having all that fun. So, of course, while I was in that struggle of non-acceptance, I didn't always feel, like I was smelling the roses and honky-dory. But the reality that I've been able to see over the last few years, particularly as the parents that I mentioned way before we started this evening, once I had that acceptance and that understanding that these are the people, this is actually the calling that I didn't, not in my plan, not in my scheme of things. Mm-hmm. But the reality was that when I had the acceptance, that struggle of how something else should be, I was at peace. And I've been able to do what I need to do. And I'll close, but just by saying in your speaking of your earlier beginnings, I was quite blown away, because the youngest of my 4 nonagenarians, who's 97, my dad, who adopted me, was a Methodist minister. Oh. And my mum married him, and her father was a Methodist minister and christened me as a baby. And sometimes I've rejected that, but as you were speaking, my heart was opening more, and maybe thinking about Sunday school and thinking of times, when I was much younger, where it was a place I felt a sense of family, even though I sat up the front and, was supposed to be quiet. But I used to say that little girls, don't bother listening to him. That's just my dad. But, I just really related to it. And Ayakema and Prakantipalo were my teachers, firstly, at Wat Buddha Dharma in 1981. I wanted to shave my hair and I wanted to become a Buddhist nun. Actually, on that course, I met a man that over a year later I was to have a baby to, and my son will be 40 in January next year. So I didn't become a nun. I often would think I would have been able to disrobe, but you cannot disrobe as a parent. And I have a girl who's nearly 29. So yeah, that has been my teaching, and it is wonderful, because it didn't take me too long to, once I stepped away from thinking something should be very different, to being able to see and to be able to be there and to recognize it, whether you call it karmic or not. I'd worked in aged care and I've done other things other than acting in my life. So I had a heart that was open and willing, from even working in nursing homes at 15 years of age, or having my grandma live with me when we lived at one of my churches. My dad's in Toronto. So yeah, that's my teaching, and I loved hearing about your early beginnings, because it really, touched my heart space and my very early start in life. Thank you.
Your name, I can't read from this. Your name is Natalie.
Natalie Page.
Natalie, this is a very small world.
Yes.
Because in 1981, I was studying with Nekkhamma and Prakantipalo at Wat Buddha Dhamma, considering becoming ordained as a monk. But I eventually ordained and trained in a Vietnamese monastery in Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma City?
Yes.
That's where my daughter and my grandchildren live.
Wow. So,
oh my gosh, sorry, I've got such goosebumps. Oklahoma, I went there in January, first time.
So this is a very tiny world.
That is very tiny. And when you were saying you were born a monk when I was younger, I used to think that I wanted, before Buddhism, I thought I wanted to be a Catholic nun, and being a Methodist minister's daughter, I thought, shh, I shouldn't say that. Oh, that's incredible. Thank you so much. Lovely to be here.
My compromise with the Methodist Church was to become an Anglican because they had religious communities. But even that was bad enough. To become an Anglican was bad enough. From the point
well, I get it. After my dad divorced my mum after 35 years, she didn't feel that she could be in the Methodist Church anymore. He married his girlfriend from 40 years before, and they're still together. 38 years later, my mum became an Anglican. She wasn't going to be seen in that church.
All these little things. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you so much. I was born a nun.
You weren't born an actor?
Yes, I was as well. I like to switch up my roles. Thank you.
Does anybody else have a desire to share their own experience of renunciation or letting go, and how that has made a difference in their lives? Now that will be Frank.
Yeah. You hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, I'm freezing at the moment. My windows are open. And you're not going to believe where I was 1.5 hours ago on a Bible study. For a year now, I joined the Bible study group, Reformed Church. Well, I don't know the English equivalent of it. This is a Hungarian group, Redfield in Sydney. And I grown up in a communist country till I was 23 years old, member of the Communist Party, because other way I would not be sitting here. There was no passport, no travel overseas if you weren't a party member. But it was just to get here to Sydney, where my whole family was living for quite a while. The first thing I remember of my youth, I always felt a dukkha because of family problems, living in a country that got beaten in every wars and overrun by Russia, and pretty Marxist teaching, whatever you received in the schools. So it's very interesting to look back of my life. I had my 80th birthday not long ago. And the first English book I had took me 6 months to read it with the Hungarian dictionary. The third died by Lobsang Rampa, the Tibetan writer. Later on, I realized that he was an English plumber in Birmingham. But he wrote about 10 books about cats and Tibet, etc. I'm very grateful to him still, whoever he was, because he told me the Four Noble Truths. And with that, I was looking to find the explanation for dukkha. And one day, tall Englishman in yellow robe was standing in front of our shop window in Osbury, that's close to the city in Sydney. It was Untitled. That was in 1968, I think. I'm not really sure about the year. And then Tansamai, a young Thai monk, his English was just as bad as mine. Somehow, I was surrounded by Buddhist monks and the Buddhist Society of New South Wales. You call this karma? No, karma is intention. But I always had the intention to learn. And as my English improved, I met Mrs. Jackson. She was a fantastic, a lady born in Russia, but she came to Australia when she was 3 years old. And she was the head of the Buddhist Society of New South Wales with Malcolm Pierce. My sister bought a villa next to Malcolm Pierce's villa. So wherever I went, there were Buddhist teachers. And then came Prabhu. He just passed away in Adelaide, I think, 2 years ago. He was 103 years old. Tremendous, very funny Thai monk. So, and then came Ilja Ledeman, long black hair in the Buddhist temple in Tambor. And then we started learning about the Dhamma together. And she became Ayakema very, very quickly. And what took me 10 years to learn, she learned it in a month. And she became the best teacher I think Australia ever had. And her teaching is still with me. I have a cassette player. She had a talk about dukkha. And I still have that talk about dukkha, where I ask questions and I share my meditation experiences with Aya. And it's so funny to hear my voice 30 years back. Really incredible, you know. But listening to the teaching, what she taught was really incredible. And I told Aya, Aya, you're the best teacher who ever taught dukkha. Really fantastic. And she was happy to hear. And the most important teaching from her was also giving up things, letting go things. But I practice every day, ever since I met Aya, is do not blame the trigger, but brings on dukkha to you. And it's a very important teaching because, like in the family, people blame each other for not being happy. I'm not happy because of you. You know, it's a terrible thing to hear it when my son-in-law says to my daughter, I was on drugs. That was because of you. So it's really a sad thing when we have the teaching, but we do not practice it. So I made aware that whatever happens in my life, I'm not going to blame the trigger, whatever causes me to suffer. So my wife has a real ball. We've been married 60 years. So whenever she says, Frank, you messed up the kitchen table or you didn't hang your pajamas straight, you know, I just smile and do not get upset, whatever happens. Not easy when you have 5 grandchildren and yeah, they cannot talk to you because they are Greek, for example, and they are a super race, and the Hungarian is just just nothing, nothing like the Greeks, for example. So all these silly things, but I never blame the trigger, whatever happens. And it was so good to hear Natalie talking about her life, and you, Thay, talking about. In Buddhism, what I really admired from year one, the sincerity. People never felt ashamed of talking about their problems. You never heard about Hosa. It's a Japanese thing with Malcolm Pierce and Nara Pierce. We sat in a circle, and each one of us told about our experiences, if we had a problem, asking for help or advice. So in the Christian church, well, I'm a Catholic, but I'm studying whatever I can because I'm really ready to follow Jesus Christ. But you know why? Because Jesus Christ, 90% of his teaching is from the Buddha. I'm convinced of it now after 80 years of studying and following the Buddha and Jesus Christ. And one funny thing, the pastor, the Protestant pastor, reading the Old Testament, New Testament, all the teachings from the Apostles, a question, and I'm the only one who can answer everything. You know why? Because of the Buddha's teaching. It's remarkable. Really made me happy. I just bought a book, Two Masters, One Message. If you can buy it, it's from the USA, from one of the universities. So Two Masters, One Message, comparing the two men's lives, how they were born, how they grown up, how they taught. The difference was Jesus had 3 years, the Buddha had 42 years. So huge difference. So if you remember the title, Two Masters, One Message. Yeah. So, okay, I'm sorry, I think I told.
I just have a question of you, Frank, and that is, my original question is, where has letting go or renunciation played a part in your spiritual life, in your development as a human being? Where has letting go?
It's a very good question. It goes back again.
Looking forward to a good answer.
It goes, I'm sincere, it goes back to dukkha. Ever since I was 15, 16, mostly 17, I felt that our life is suffering. It's just family problems, the country's problem, etc., etc. So because of knowing, convinced that dukkha is, that suffering is, that we have joys, but we mostly have problems, unsatisfactoriness because of change. I said to myself, I had enough. I'm going to live a celibate life. And it's not easy. I still see a pretty woman. My heart starts beating, but I haven't touched a woman for any sexual thing for the past 6 years. So that's where it took me, giving up. And it's a very painful giving up, I assure you. Yeah. It's not easy at all because I've been living a simple marriage for 60 years. My wife is watching TV next room, but it's not just old age, but I knew if I die and I see a young couple or any couple having sex, I'm not going to be thrown there again because I've just about had enough. And that's where the giving up is. And it's not easy. But I might be wrong. It might be the wrong way to take dukkha that seriously. But I think the Buddha said once, even a little dung stinks, I won't recommend you little existence. I don't know where I read it, but that was the Buddha's word. So giving up renunciation, like it's very difficult and painful, giving up all sex. Sometimes it's not just sex, but the closeness of a female person, the kindness, the smile. And I miss that terribly. I don't know if it will be enough not to come back. So maybe you have an advice for me, Thay, because it's not easy. I'm suffering sometimes.
I did have a question for you, I know. Your sense of your desire to renounce even this life, even living, of rebirth, is that the result of a stick or a carrot?
A stick or a carrot?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about the motivation to do something is the result of being smacked on the bum like the donkey, or having a carrot held out and being drawn by the attractive nature of the carrot. Which is yours?
It's not the carrot. No. Certainly it's the bum, it's the kicks I received from birth. I was born 1942, February. The American planes were bombing our city. I was 4-year-old. I remember the bombs, bang, bang. I was lying down in our garden. The other side of the river Danube, the bombs blowing up the factory that was for making guns, etc. And then half of the family was killed by the Russians. And then father passed away. My mother had a terrible life with a new man. Finally, I had peace getting to Australia. I'm always very grateful to this beautiful country where I could really grow up and hear about the Dhamma. So it was the many, many kicks. I think pain and kicks is the best teacher, because everything goes well in your life and comfortable. The ego grows with the good fortune. But the pain reminds you, you only have a few years here, and you want to come back? And where will you end up? And this evening in the Bible study, I were talking about nirvana. I don't know how you call it in English, for the Catholic or for the Protestants. You know, heaven forever. And my mates, they are all 80, 90-year-old Hungarian ladies, in which the teaching. They think that they will go to heaven in this form, as a character like I am, you know. But nirvana is a little bit different. There is no I, you, or me. But for the Christians, it's really funny. They think that they have no idea about it. They all want to go there. And lady said, oh, I have a lot of doubts about the life after that, what will happen then? How are we going to go to heaven? And then I told her, this is already the life forever. If you can give up the love I that want to go to heaven, and greed, hatred, and illusion given up, is nirvana already here, now, sitting and watching the Zoom? And the lady, I think she understood me, but the priest didn't like it some. Of course, because the Bible, every word is saint. They don't worry about things like they talked an hour about Judas. Why did Judas give up Jesus Christ? And I had one question from the priest. What would have happened if Jesus Christ is not on the cross, doesn't end up on the cross? There would be no Christianity. And he couldn't answer me, didn't answer. Without the crucifixion, there would be no Christianity. Yeah, so it was interesting. So I'm enjoying this, being a Catholic and learning the Protestant teaching. Sometimes I'm shocked. Like, as a Catholic, Jesus was a single boy, just Virgin Mary. The Protestants have 3 brothers for Jesus and 2 younger sisters. Now, where would that put Holy Mary as a virgin? So, but I keep telling them, don't take things so seriously from the Bible, from the Old Testament, that God told Job, go to Nineveh, and then the big fish swallowed him, etc. And once God was fighting. That was in the Old Testament. God was fighting with one of the prophets, and he had the hip was twisted out in the fighting. I just had a hip replacement not long ago. So it's really, the Buddha's teaching is the real reality, because we do not talk about the past, the Old Testament, the Jewish nation, the chosen people, but Jesus Christ should be followed because he was like the Buddha, no difference at all. Okay,
so Frank,
from them.
So Frank, I'm just wondering whether we should give someone else a chance to talk.
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I talk too much. Very rarely I can.
It's the Irish in you. It's the Irish in you, Frank. You are.
Thanks for listening.
Does anybody else have anything to add from their own experience before we bring the evening to an end? A question of letting go, and particularly letting go of this thought of self. You're still muted, so now you're right.
Yeah, thank you, Thay. This is not about a personal occasion when I chose to give something up, but it's your teaching on nekkhamma is brought to mind. Bhante Tejadharma's teaching on nekkhamma that I remember from I don't know how many years ago, and the thing that has always stayed with me about it was that he said nekkhamma is usually translated as renunciation in English, but a better translation for it would be to not pick something up. And so rather than have something and give it up, you look at it and you think, I don't actually need that in my life. I'm not going to pick it up. And I found that a really useful way of thinking about all kinds of things. This is, I think probably because I've often been too anxious to please, and I've often said, yes to things that I would rather have said no to. The idea that you could look at something and say, yes, well, that's there, but I choose not to have it. That was a really useful idea for me, and I've called on it often ever since. Yeah.
So it's more about being proactive in a way.
Could be, yes. Yeah. You choose to give something up before you've taken it up. Yes. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll share if I may. Not sure if this is exactly what you're meaning, but for me, it makes me think about what's happening. My son at the moment has just turned 18 and he's got his driver's license and he's off doing his own thing as a bit of an independent young adult. And so it's making me realize quite directly that he's no longer, or that his connection to me is being severed, if that sort of makes sense. You know, for while they're very much in your care as a young child, they almost feel like part of you. You almost feel like you need to shape them. And while I haven't deliberately tried to make him a copy of me, I'm sure there's a little part of me that has. But now I get this real sense that he's independent and that he's not connected with me literally, and even starting to sort of be not connected to me figuratively. You know, he's really finding himself in the world. So that is like it's not so much me giving up as in it's being taken away from me. But I'm doing my very best to let him go and let him explore and let him find his feet as an adult.
Yes. One of this will come up in another talk, but one thing that Vietnamese people have said to me is that, oh, Thay, you're not married, you don't have children, you're much lighter than we are. And what they mean is that I lead somehow a superior life to them. And I say, well, actually, I don't agree with you. I think that one of the places in life that requires the greatest renunciation is when parents have to let go of their children.
Yep.
In fact, you know, your child never turns out the way you want them to. They don't become an extension of you, and you don't even know that you wanted that until they actually go off by themselves. So there is great renunciation involved in having children, and it's at least as significant as the renunciation I might experience as a monk. I mean, I might not, from the time of my ordination, not have sex and not do this and not do that and blah, blah, blah. But I don't have heartache that comes when I have to let go of my child and let them be who they are. And so I tend not to agree with those Vietnamese people. I think that parenthood is a path of renunciation, or it's a path of suffering. If you choose not to renounce, then you're going to suffer a lot. You know. And it's you know, to me, I mean, I've never been a parent, but I've been a child. And the relationship between parents and children is a profoundly spiritual one. It's, you know, my feeling is that the karmic connection between myself and my parents is like the deepest I know, or the karmic connection with my grandparents even is amongst the deepest connections that I know. So relationships bring with it renunciation. Either you can choose not to have them and say, look at a relationship and think, no, I'm not going to have this because I don't want to engage with that kind of attachment and that kind of suffering. or you just love and then you learn to let go. And of course, there is the big letting go when the beloved passes out of this life. That's so. Doesn't matter which way you turn, you're going to learn. That's the good thing. We're all on our way out.
Yep, we are. Yep. And that is the biggest letting go, as you say, when a loved one, passes out from this life, and you have to let go and realise they're not going to be around anymore. Very hard.
Do you think it's more significant than when you let go, than when you have to die and you have to let go of everything?
To me, where I'm sitting now, I would say yes, but I haven't. Well, in this life anyway, I haven't reached the end of it, so I don't know how I'll feel. But to me, letting go of a loved one is the worst, the cruelest letting go there is. Yeah.
And I think the next question becomes, well, where does the thought of a self, an I, a me, and a mine, what part does that play in the suffering that comes when we lose someone or something we love?
Because we're attached to them, and we think our ego tells us we're entitled to have them around forever, and we're not. We've got to get rid of the idea of attachment, and that's not easy.
No, it's not. But we do have help on the path.
Yep.
I'm pushing this book. He's a great teacher, Buddhadasa Bhikkhu.
Thank you so much, Thay,
You're welcome.
for the talk and for raising so many questions.
Thank you, Thay.
Shall we dedicate the merit?
Oh, yes, please.
So may the wholesome energy that we have generated together here tonight and at any other time in our lives be for the benefit of all living beings. May all living beings know peace and joy and the causes of peace and joy, and may we all continue to walk the path of truth and love together. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you very much.
Thank you.